Um, my name's Chloe Walker. Please welcome to the Society of American Archivists Performing Arts Steering Committee meet and greet. Very long title. Today we have our presenter is Scott Blackshire. I know Scott through contacting him over um, some information with uh, when I was in grad school as looking into performing arts collections. Scott is the former um, McNay curator for the Tobin collection, which is a performing arts collection in San Antonio. And we're very excited to have him here today because we have yet to have a curator give a presentation. So this is an exciting opportunity to witness how some of these collections that we talk about in our steering committee all the time and how they're presented and how they're put together and how they're displayed. So I'm going to turn it over to Scott to introduce himself, and I'll continue to admit people throughout.
Well, hello everyone. Thanks again, Chloe, for the introduction and for the invitation to be here. Um, I'm Scott Blackshire, and as of next week, I will be the Dean and Director of the McCall School of Visual and Performing Arts at a small liberal arts university, Coker University in Hartsville, South Carolina. As Chloe mentioned, uh, I am the former curator of the Tobin Collection of Theater Arts at the McNay Art Museum, and quite extensive performing arts collection focused on theater arts. And uh, as you'll see, if you can see right now, I do not have a background in archival studies, nor do I have a background in art history. Um, my undergraduate and master's degree are in opera performance, but as you know, the history of music parallels the history of art and politics, and it's really all combined. And in my early days in New York, I had the opportunity of being the administrator of a quite hefty private art collection, something I'd done for a couple of high net worth individuals before I moved to Austin and got my PhD in performance studies. So they're really looking at how to engage a community with um, the arts writ large, but um, with regard to the McNay, they were looking for someone with a performance studies background to help reconsider how the Tobin Collection of Theater Arts was presented and how a curator might engage the community. So it was a really lovely opportunity. Since then, last summer, I moved back into the space of academia, but I'm really happy to be here to talk to you about my work. Um, so if you haven't been to San Antonio or seen the McNay Art Museum, here are a couple of images of it. The McNay Art Museum was the first modern art museum to open in 1920, and that would be the Spanish villa on the left belonging to Marion Kugler McNay. And later in the mid-aughts, or the early, I think 2011 perhaps, the the really modern Steeren Center was added to the right. So it's a beautiful mix of old and new, and an absolutely wonderful collection that has been really curated with great care and consideration for the community over the past 50 plus years. Again, I am the former curator of the Tobin Collection of Theater Arts, and I like showing this image. It's the image from the lobby going down to the garden level of the Steeren Center. And I mean, I'm not a visual arts person, but I was walking down to a meeting and I felt like this was one of the most beautiful sights I'd ever seen. And I just felt so fortunate to be working in such a space. So I like to share it. There's this beautiful metal fretwork called the log jam that's ubiquitous at the McNay, and it just cast these lovely shadows. And then down at the bottom of the staircase was this Mercier bronze Gloria Victis, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful setting. Um, so today I'm going to talk about the Tobin Collection of Theater Arts, give you a quick history of the collection, what is in it, what it represents, and some of the ways that I used it. So by the numbers, there are many, many objects, over 13,000 in the collection. Drawings, mostly works on paper, set designs, costume designs, over 2,000 rare books, prints, sculptures, or maquettes, small scale models of set designs, photographs, paintings, books, and we do have a nice assortment of costumes. Um, but as anyone working with costumes will tell you, they're the hardest to store. So we don't seek out that many costumes. So the McNay Art Museum has a storied history with Margaret Batts Tobin, the mother of Robert Tobin. She was a social arts leader, champion in San Antonio and in Texas. She was instrumental in helping the McNay Art Institute move into a museum space in 1954. She was one of the board members that led that charge. Um, Throughout her life, she encouraged Robert to pursue his creative interests. He was a bit of an intellectual, enjoyed the theater and ballet like his mother, studied set design for a semester or two at UT Austin. But when his father died, he moved back to San Antonio to help his mother with the business, aerial land surveying. And that's really how they made their fortune, which they shared greatly with the community and with by supporting arts in the United States and around the world. Since Robert Tobin's death in 2000, his estate and artworks have been divided into two different groups. The Tobin Theater Arts Fund, which is charged with purchasing artworks for the Tobin Collection of Theater Arts. They also sponsor a lot of arts developing projects in the country, and the Tobin Endowment, which is active in civic projects in San Antonio. So Robert Tobin transferred his vast collection of artworks through 5 different gifts, beginning in 1984 with the opening of the Tobin Library that his mother built in honor of his 50th birthday. So his rare book collection, championing mostly the documentation of about 500 years of excellence in theater arts, was brought to the museum and stored in the library. And here's an example of one of those gorgeous books with a scene design with it's an etching with hand coloring in gold. The image doesn't really show it off that well, but this is just one example of the over 2,000 books that are in the rare book collection. The next gift came in 1998 of Russian artworks from Russian theater artists. We have Alexander Benoit, ballet set design on the left, and Pavel Chelichev, his costume design for the Queen in Concerto de Mozart. And again, the few images that have been selected here do not really serve the purpose of showing the magnitude of the collection or the brilliance of it. So I'm just going to say probably a couple more times. Feel free to go to mcnayart.org and explore the theater arts collection. It's really quite wonderful. The third gift was a gift of American art, American theater designers, Boris Onesfeld, Robert Wilson on the right, and Donald Ohenslager in the middle. Ohenslager was a set designer himself in New York and an avid collector. And if I understand correctly, when he passed, Robert Tobin purchased the vast majority of Ohenslager's collection and brought it into his own in order to preserve that. Robert was a big champion of theater and performance, and he felt that the artworks, the ephemera that came from the development of a production, ought to be viewed as art in its own right. And having worked with the collection, I believe that wholeheartedly myself. The that should be the fourth gift, not the sixth gift, um, was British artists, European and mostly British artists. You have some beautiful Tazina Firth, Timothy O'Brien costume designs on the left for Turandot. And each of those little discs that you see on there, those are hand placed sequins. So these designs really pop when you display them. And a Cecil Beaton design on the right for the set of Henry IV. And then the final gift, a few years, 4 years after Robert Tobin passed, was the gift of pre-century artists. And here we have a beautiful etching showing late 18th century performance. The next section of this little presentation is going to show you the types of performance that are mostly represented in the collection. We have opera. Um, Here's a Jim Dine charcoal and acrylic on paper. It's a design for projection Salome Houston Grand Opera 1986 performance, I believe. We have a whole series of these. They're quite stunning, large scale artworks. On the left, Giacomo Torelli's etching for uh, Il Bellerofonte, and on the right, some Rafe Koltai, uh, a set design for Die Valkyrie. Koltai's designs are really contemporary. They're quite futuristic, in fact. And he uses a lot of metal and he displays them with these plexiglass domes with the pieces suspended as they would be over the stage. Um, as a sculpture in and of itself, it the Koltai maquettes are wonderful pieces to look at and to discuss. Um, so on the right, we have an artwork by Nicolas Benoit, a scene design for the Siege of Corinth in 1975. And this artwork brings me to the point to talk about what's exciting to find in a special collection when you dive into the history of an artwork. Um, for many people who are opera fans, the 1975 Siege of Corinth performance was a watershed moment in opera. It was the moment when Beverly Sills' fabulous coloratura soprano moved from city opera and made her Metropolitan Opera debut. Um, so that in and of itself is interesting. To have the set design for that performance, you can see an image of the performance on the left. But more importantly, the more I researched this artwork and the performance, I learned that Margaret and Robert Tobin actually helped produce and financially supported this production. So it really clicks that the Tobins were instrumental in developing and stewarding cultural moments for those who love opera, and that was an exciting thing as a curator to learn about what is in the collection. Um, the Tobin Collection of Theater Arts represents a lot of musicals, mostly American musical. Here we have the Bali High transformation scene from the uh, original South Pacific performance. Joe Melzinger is a phenomenal set designer, but he is also an extremely prolific watercolorist. His use of the medium is fantastic, and this is one of my favorite pieces. And it's again, it's you can talk about this as a um, wonderful example of the use of watercolor that also happens to be a set design. Um, in the collection, there is a set design by Boris Aronson from The Fiddler on the Roof, original production on the left, and Oliver Smith's set design for West Side Story 1957. Now, this set design, and when you see images of the original production of West Side Story, it's very, very different than what most of us remember from the 1961 film version. Um, and I just think it's interesting to see how they took the musical and transferred it into the real settings of New York City versus what they tried to create on stage. Um, the Smith design compared to the film, it seems a little childlike, perhaps, but nonetheless, it's an interesting piece of American musical theater history. Moving forward, since the collection has been at the McNay, it's acquired a lot of new artworks, including this maquette for Spring Awakening by Christine Jones and the costume designs for the same production by Susan Hilferty. Most of you may know Susan Hilferty as the 2004 Tony Award winner for the original Broadway production of Wicked, but still touring the world. And this is an example of one of their earlier, their later productions, Spring Awakening, Christine Jones, and they are now working also on a production of Traviata at the Met, I believe. So one of the exciting things as a curator with all of this beautiful, beautiful artwork and archival material at hand is to create exhibitions. And I was very fortunate about uh, 4 years, 5 years ago to meet Susan Hilferty. And we started talking about what an exhibition would look like at the McNay. Um, Her Elphaba gown from Wicked had been displayed before, but I wanted to create a larger exhibition that not only brought in more Wicked costumes in advance of the film that was being created at the time, but that also brought in a lot of her other designs. And working with a living artist was wonderful. Um, she's very energetic, and we had a great time creating the checklist. And you can see how the exhibition turned out. I felt it would be, I used mostly women artists um, and brought in large scale artworks from the McNay collection to put in conversation with her costumes. So the image on the left is a Grace Hardigan mid-century painting. She's from the New York School of Abstract Expressionists. A gorgeous, gorgeous painting that creates a lovely conversation with Susan Hilferty's costumes for Claire in The Visit, which were worn by the actress's name. I can't recall. It'll come to me. Um, but as costumes, you can see Chita Rivera. They were worn by Chita Rivera, and you can see in the chiffon where her heels have gotten caught in the costumes, and that sort of wear and tear, the sense that this costume has been lived in, was a nice thing to show. And then to the right of the costumes, we have Susan's actual designs. In the center, an amazing costume, quite sculptural from Susan for Queen of Hearts in Wonderland. And that just looks wonderful and has a great conversation with the Judith Godwin painting. Um, and to the right, Susan's original artwork, along with some beautiful Sonia Delaunay designs. That was a lot of fun bringing in Delaunay, Alexandra Exter, um, uh, Louise Nevelson, and some these women artists that Susan really appreciated. Um, and then the picture on the right, as a curator and an archivist, you're very careful with artworks and with objects. Um, this jacket for the ringmaster in a Ringling and Barnum and Bailey production actually had a little label inside it that said Scott. And it's their artworks that we borrowed. But Susan was adamant that it would fit me. She wanted to see what it looked like on me, so she literally forced me to put it on, and then spent about 10 minutes fitting the jacket on me when it was just going to go onto a, a dress form. So, but it was a fun moment, and to get over the shyness of putting it on, she's like, Scott, it's been on an elephant, so and she says it's mine, so put it on. But it was a wonderful experience working with Susan and bringing to life her career, and then working with her to celebrate in the library space all the makers that have supported her work, the beaders, the pattern makers, the knitters, the fabric designers, um, the leather workers, all these different people who helped bring her designs to life. She created a whole section of the exhibition to celebrate them, which I think is a generous spirit from a living artist. Um, Looking at the Tobin Collection of Theater Arts as a living, breathing archive, as a curator, one of the things that was it was clear in my work is to look for gaps in what's missing from the collection. In museums across the country, artists of color and women artists are represented, probably 4 to 1 uh, in collections. Sorely underrepresented. Um, so one of the things that doing some research, I learned about Caroline Seidel, the designer on the left, and Cora Medici on the right. These women at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century, were instrumental in designing costumes for the way we look at Broadway now. Caroline Seidel was the first woman to have her name in a playbill, along with Cora Medici. Um, the When Caroline Seidel died in 1907, Cora Medici became then the go-to person, and was doing dozens of productions at the same time. The design on the left for the Nouch Dancer in the Tourist is a gorgeous artwork, watercolor with bits of glitter on the edge of the skirt. So again, it's a really lush design, and really expresses the spirit of the dancer. Now, when you look at images of a Nouch dancer from 1906, the beginning of the 20th century, they are not glamorous dancers. They're they're folk dancers, dancing in traditional costumes. This is very much a stylized Broadway version of that. On the right, Cora Medici designed for many of the Schubert Ziegfeld productions. And we know this is a Schubert production because of the oval. All of the costumes in the oval were the Schubert designs. And while there are very few designs by these women in the United States, so it took me a few years to find a portfolio that I could pull into the collection. At the Theater Museum in Vienna, in their archive, they have over 400 artworks by these two women designers. It's part of what they call their American collection, and they have no idea how they got there. So I was able to go over to Vienna for a few days and spend time in their archive looking through all of the designs to find some similarities, maybe same productions. And it was just a really interesting archival moment to do that research online, find this amazing collection, and then go and work with it with some wonderful colleagues to see if we could maybe answer some of the questions as to how all of the designs from Cora Medici and Caroline Seidel landed in Vienna. Still unanswered. Ballet and dance are represented in the Tobin Collection of Theater Arts. These two artworks here are by Leon Bakst for Scheherazade, the Ballet Russe production of Scheherazade. And many of you might have attended the presentation by Dr. Caroline Hamilton, who I had the pleasure of working with for a couple of years, preparing the recent Ballet Russe exhibition at the McNay that she installed and oversaw. But I include these images here. They were part of an exhibition that was shown at the McNay in 2019, and then they went on tour for about 2.5 years. So now they are back in storage, and I believe they have a very long resting period. Perhaps they'll be coming out in 2028, maybe 2029. but this image on the left of the set design for Scheherazade is about 5 feet wide, 4 feet tall, and just lush and rich. The color is amazing, and the sense of scale for the set and what uh, Diaghilev, what uh, the Ballet Russe was presenting at the time. You know how they were doing this amazing storytelling on stage in this um, new fashion. And then on the right is a design for an odalisque that is just as one of my previous curators of the Tobin collection of theater arts says. She said, "It's just so damn sexy." But it's a really joyful, beautiful costume design showing a lot of movement and how the costume would look on stage. Here are some more Ballet Russe objects. A design by Henri Matisse. On the left, a cloak for Le Chant du Rossignol. And on right, a beautiful cloak by Natalia Goncharova for Le Coq d'Or. I love this design by Goncharova on the right. If you know her work, her visual work, or her theater arts work, you'll see that that floral design shows up in many different iterations throughout her work. It's really emblematic of her. And then in the center is this really uh, petite, very sweet, kind of precious set design for Le Tricorne that Pablo Picasso put together for the Ballet Russe. It's beautiful in its own right. Thinking of it as an archive piece, there's writing and inscription on the back of that cardboard. So it's interesting to see like the use of some found materials to put together the ideas for this set design. And I think of Picasso as sort of a brusque character, but the fact that he's created this very delicate model and this very pastel laden set design for this ballet is I like the opposition that puts into my mind. Um, but he did a lot of work for the Ballet Russe. He was fond of ballet. His first wife was a ballet dancer, and so he had a really uh, good relationship with Serge Diaghilev, as did all of these other fine artists whose names we know in the realm of fine arts. Serge Diaghilev, the producer of Ballet Russe, was able to convince these folks to come and design for the stage, for which we're very happy. Here are some really interesting uh, choreography maps that were done by Arch Lauderer, more than likely for some lighting designs to come. But he would watch the performances and he would map where dancers were going so that then he could create a plan for a lighting scheme that would support the performance. But in their own right, they're really interesting graphic works. Finally, plays are represented in the collection. Alphonse Mucha on the left has some costume designs. We know him more, at least I did, from the JOB cigarette ads, um, his Art Nouveau style. And but it's interesting to see at the same time how he was designing for Greek tragedy on the right. Edward Gordon Craig, British artist. We have his set designs for Hamlet, showing Hamlet in action on the left. And you can see on the right of that set design, there's the tall gold columns. Edward Gordon Craig created these small model screens that were some range between like 8 inches tall, 12 inches tall, so that they could create the sets and consider how the cast would move around these, what would be large set pieces eventually. And the McNay has this set of model screens, which are really, really, really interesting. Some beautiful collage work by Ottokar Schindler. Beautiful designs for A Midsummer Night's Dream, 1976. And from a theater standpoint and an archival standpoint, I love the fact that he used magazine clippings on the design for the right to reference how Tatiana's hair might be done or some of the other characters. It's kind of a little snapshot of 1970s fashion that he's pulling into this world. So working with the special collection entails accountability, collaboration, and for the exhibitions that I present, teaching and learning. So I'm going to just run through some of the ways that I've been able to and fortunate to use the Tobin Collection of Theater Arts. Um, One of my first exhibitions was about Robert Tobin. I felt that would be a great way as the new curator of the collection to dive into his world, understand him as a collector, curator, visionary, and really get to know the collection from his perspective. And it was a lot of research, but a lot of fun getting into his mind and understanding why he collected certain things and what he felt was important. Um, One of the things that I've learned from the Tobin archive, there are a lot of objects there, and one of the pieces that came out of this exhibition was learning about Eugene Berman and this case, this attaché case of correspondence that covered about a decade between Robert Tobin and artist Eugene Berman. Mostly, or a good chunk of it, was about this fantastical uh, fountain project that was being considered for the first Spoleto Festival, Spoleto Music Festival in Italy, that Robert was part producer of. So again, another cultural moment for the world. But it was Peter Benson Miller, the former director of the American Academy in Rome, reached out to me in 2021 asking if we had any information on this project and any images of these fountains. So that was a really, really rich moment to dive into the archive and sort through these letters, read them, find the information that would help Miller create this article on this moment of development in Spoleto. As archivists, you'll probably recognize that not everything is always noted. Sometimes you're not sure where objects are. Sometimes there are certain objects that you have to go searching for. And in this case, in this correspondence, there were sketchbooks that were mentioned over and over and over again, going between Robert Tobin and Giancarlo Menotti, the composer, and Eugene Berman, and all these designs. And it took about a week or so to go through a lot of old files to find exactly where those sketchbooks were located in the Tobin Library with the rare books. But that was a nice moment to then be able to say, hey, we've got them. And he was able to make images for his article. Now, Robert Tobin, one of his theories or one of the tenets of his collecting was that he appreciated the way a single stage work can give birth to a variety of interpretations. And so I presented a couple of artworks, handful of artworks that sort of represent that. Here we have three different, very different productions of Hamlet. Edward Gordon Craig's image on the left, a Swedish, American but born Swedish production of Rockabye Hamlet in the center, which has a lot of sequins and glitter on it, which you can't really see. And then a beautiful costume designed by Robert Purziola for a 1996 production of Hamlet. Again, Fidelio, the only opera written by Beethoven, gave rise to three different types of productions here. Artworks by Boris Aronson, the Wiesbaden Opera Company in the center, and by Rex Whistler. All similar in their dark tones, but again, very different. And it's nice to see the different ways different artists interpreted the needs of the production. Here's a brief little example of what that exhibition looked like, artworks. that voiceover is mine. I pardon me. You can see a mix of Ballet Russe images and contemporary modern artworks.
Now, Scott, we can't hear the voiceover for some reason,
Oh, okay,
but
good. That's fine. That's
if
good.
you
And
want
I'll
to
just,
walk us through it, that's fine too.
okay, perfect. So here we have an image of Margaret Batts Tobin and young Robert Tobin there. And these are some costumes on the right from the Siege of Corinth production with Beverly Sills that I mentioned, and an array of objects that represent the different gifts of Robert Tobin. Um, Another example of accountability in presenting artworks like this is the Picasso to Hockney Modern Art on Stage. This exhibition, the checklist was provided to me by my predecessor. So when I arrived at the McNay, this long, very long checklist was sitting on my desk, and so it took a while to sort of wrap my head around why these objects and how to how to show them to the public, how to engage the public. Um, One of the first things I did was talk to our production team and the wonderful Ruben Luna. Um, I was joking with him and I said, we have this beautiful design you'll see on the right by Pablo Picasso for the Ballet Russe production of Pulcinella. And putting these artworks in a 5,000 square foot rectangle, I asked him, I said, can we just build this set and just have it there when folks walked in? And he took a day or two and thought about it, and he said yes. So here, I don't know if you can see my cursor, we have the set that we built for with an interactive area inside, where inside we had a miniature set with some straw and paper puppets that people could create their own performances. And then these performances were projected on a screen, which was on the back part of this structure inside. And then here, hanging from the ceiling, is the original artwork. So it was this kind of meta moment of Picasso and the Ballet Russe, but really getting folks to engage in different ways with the artwork. And here's a quick look at what that Picasso to Hockney exhibition looked like. There's the interior exhibition pieces. We have a very animated person here talking about the engagement for students. There's the miniature, and you can see the projection in the back behind the teacher. Was something that was something that the McNay had not done before. So it was nice to work with education to come up with some new ideas. Goncharova collage. And so there's more Ballet Russe artworks, Picasso, David Hockney. It was a really wonderful exhibition to put together. And out of that exhibition came some interesting research. On the left is a poster for the French trilogy, as they called it, at the Metropolitan Opera. Three one-act operas that they were putting together. And in the archive, I found this score for Parade, which was one of the acts. And as I opened it, these Polaroids fell out. And having seen the set designs or knowing the poster and seeing the Polaroids that were pasted into the score and the ones that fell out, I thought, this is amazing. I have David Hockney's score for Parade. This is amazing. But as a researcher, it was clear that it was not David Hockney's. The score belonged to John Dexter, the director of the productions. And what he would do is he would take the Polaroids that Hockney would bring in from his studio and paste them in where they would go in terms of the scene changes, the set shifts, the different elements that would be introduced at different times. So it was a really interesting way to know that Hockney was working with Polaroids to bring his artwork to rehearsals and to talk about how the set might be making small models and taking Polaroids. One thing that I theorized that I was able to present to the International Art Historians um, uh, organization is that this use of Polaroids in the 80s really predates what most art historians think of as the time that David Hockney started working with Polaroids or really used it in his fine art. But I think it's interesting to sort of put the notion out there that he was beginning to think about collaging and using these Polaroids in interesting ways, 15 years before it's actually really documented in his fine art. So another piece of archival work that came from that. Hollywood Sistine Chapel is a COVID response exhibition. In the fall of 2020, I was slated to do the Tim Burton exhibition, but typically I was told that about 20,000 people come to see that exhibition. And we had some conversation, decided it would not be good to do that in the fall of 2020. So I really had to stretch and come up with an idea. And I knew that there was this beautiful Hollywood backdrop recovery project that where these art directors saved about 200 MGM backdrops that were slated to be destroyed. And the ones that I worked with Karen Manus to bring to the McNay represent Renaissance murals in the Sistine Chapel. These backdrops were used to create the set of the Sistine Chapel for a movie called The Shoes of the Fisherman. And it was a lovely way to highlight hand painting. Um, and we were able to bring out some of our Renaissance artwork, which we don't often do at the McNay. So a beautiful dalmatic on the left, and then a beautiful Yaroslav Malina maquette for Rigoletto, this kind of deconstructed Renaissance look. So it was spacious and open, so safe for folks to walk through, and it really became a contemplative space, um, uh, and as well as a space of teaching and learning to learn all about the hand painting. We talked a little bit about restoration of the Sistine Chapel, and again on the left, a original uh, Renaissance artwork of Saint John the Baptist. In the center, the Last Judgment. The bottom half of that backdrop, which was really interesting to see up close. And then I took the opportunity to add some performance art ephemera in the mix by Ernesto Pujol. So finally, coming to the end, in 2023, the fall of 2023 into 2024, we actually did put on Dreamland, Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas. We moved it to both Steer Space, and this was an interesting exhibition because we only have 9 objects from the making of the film, a few maquettes, and then some models that were actually used in the filming. So each one of those pieces did not need their own, 500 square foot space. So what we did was we really brought in the notion of surrealism, and we were thinking about Disney's Haunted Mansion and how to create an experience for the public that would draw them by the Burton objects, but then expose them to a lot of other wonderful artworks from the McNay's main collection. On the left, well, in the center is Jack's Tower, a very large scale model that was used in the filming. And then on the left is beautiful, beautiful acrylic by Carl Rice Embry, large scale, about 4 feet wide, 6 feet tall. And we, as gorgeous as it is, it's a little creepy. What's that baby doing there? And why is there a ladder going up to the roof? Um, Attics are scary for some people. And then there's this really interesting self-portrait on the right by Julie Heffernan. It looks very Christmassy and very cheery, but when you look at the imagery uh, with a fine eye, you see that there are dead birds hanging on the tree, and there's a little disturbing imagery in it, but all together helping support this idea of what's odd in art. In the center is the bed that was used for the production. Um, on the left, beautiful self-portrait by Diane Gamboa that was in the Hall of Peculiar Portraits. Beautiful Marilyn Lanphier sculpture, lead and wood. And then on the right is this really strange and spooky design by Robert Israel for the Doctor in Punch and Judy. And we realized that that was about as grotesque as we could go. We had a lot of artworks that were really skewing to bloody, gory, and then we sort of pulled back from that and thought we'd just go disturbing in a certain way, a better presentation for the community. And then when you walked into the exhibition, you were greeted by Oogie Boogie on the left and this large scale Paul Maxwell painting, and then an Alexander Benoit portrait for the Hall of Peculiar Portraits. The Maxwell painting represents what was going on throughout the space, where large scale paintings were considered to be potential other worlds for some of Burton's creatures. So would Oogie Boogie live in this environment? How would that play? What's that conversation about? So we had prompts on the for the community. So to have them look at this artwork in the center as and consider it as an alternative environment, and we did that throughout the exhibition to just to get people stretch their thinking into what it might be like to step into the world of a painting. And here's a little look at what that. And this brings us to the end of the presentation. You can see the large scale painting on the right, the Maxwell. And we did a lot with graphics. Really bringing the mantra was internal mantra was come for the Burton, but come back for the McNay. So it was a lovely moment to take these objects from the Tobin collection of theater arts that represent an iconic film and present them with artworks from the main collection that people would not have expected to see. And it's a good thing we waited because we got 65,000 people at last count for this exhibition. And it was quite a draw, including a bit of a Twitter storm in Japan. So Sandy Skoglund's squirrels, one of the most disturbing artworks we have in terms of crazy environment. So I want to be mindful of time, and we're getting to the end of this. Finally, I just want to leave you with the notion that I think Robert Tobin, although he was a collector, he was a keen archivist, and one of his quotes is that these books and drawings should be made accessible to students and scholars, and that these materials have to be used as well as taken care of. And I feel very fortunate that I was able to have that experience at the McNay as the former curator of the Tobin Collection of Theater Arts. And I urge you, if you're curious, to go to mcnayart.org and explore not only the Tobin Collection of Theater Arts, but the entire collection. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Scott. I will open the floor to any questions. If anyone has any questions for Scott, you can just chime in, or if you'd like to drop them in the chat, I'm happy to read those.
I feel like that was a lot of material to put out there.
I'll ask a question to start. Hi. So you don't have to stare at a black square on the screen. Um, so you said you don't have an art history
Chloe?
background, but yes. Oh, can you hear me?
Okay, can you hear me, Chloe?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I had to switch. I lost power, but your
No
question.
problem. Yes, you don't have an art history background, but you talk very eloquently about the art that you're looking at and the pieces that you're working with. Where did you start to learn how to present these pieces in a setting of artwork or a museum setting in this case?
It really stems from my early work in New York as a singer. I was you know needed a job, so I started working for this high net worth individual, um, administering a lot of administering his art collection. So doing research on pieces, working on loans, and that experience, with when you're working in an office that has a Monet hanging in it, you really get to understand art, and doing the research. So it just sort of came not naturally, but through working with him and seeing how he talked about his artwork. That's just something that had set with me for quite a long time, and that sort of reemerged when I was able to take the position of the Tobin collection curator. Um, and I don't worry so much about the art history part of presenting. Um, if I did, I couldn't do it because I'm not an art historian, but I am a musician, um, and I understand the history of art. So I think of it from that perspective. And then I always want to talk about the exhibition and the artworks in ways that a community member can join me in that conversation and not feel like there's a wall of academic, you know, chit chat in front of them, but it's really open for conversation about what they notice. Um, and the exhibitions are put together to create an experience for the community. So that's really how I talk about it. I think everyone has their own style, but that's just mine.
Thank you. We have a question in the chat. Megan said, thank you so much. For something like the Dreamland exhibit, what was the decision-making process like in terms of deciding what non-Burton pieces to pair with the Nightmare Before Christmas items?
Um, so the decision process, my assistant curator, Kim Neptune, and we talked a lot about what, again, starting with what's the experience that folks are going to have when they come in. And knowing that there were, 9 objects to go in 5,000 square feet, um, sort of how do you draw people through an exhibition? Um, and in that vein, looking at the objects, of the Burton objects, and then just scouring through the collection, the Tobin collection and the main collection at the McNay, to find artworks that spoke to us, that met the brief of either being peculiar or odd or spooky or otherworldly. Um, so it was a lot of research in the collection, and then the Hall of Peculiar Portraits was really just a lot of fun to go through and pick artworks that were maybe costume designs that we're now looking as portraits. Some of the like we have a beautiful Kathy Kollwitz. Uh, I think it's a woodcut of a child, and it is. I mean, it's exquisite artwork, exquisite. But there's something in that child's eyes that makes it a little creepy. So we were looking at artworks that we would go, that's just a little odd. That's just a little odd. So that was, I guess that was the decision making process. If we thought something was a little odd, like let's put it in. You're
Excellent. Thank you
welcome,
so
Megan.
much. Um, Courtney Thomas asked, I love the exhibition designs. Oops. Were there any ideas that weren't feasible that you wish you could have been that could have been implemented? How did you approach experimenting with the exhibition hall itself?
So one of the great things about being a new curator is that I had no preconceived notions about what was possible or not possible. So um, I immediately would have an idea and I'd go to the prep lead, who's in charge of the building and the painting of the sets and the exhibition pieces. And, we talk through designs. Um, and sometimes things were like, no, we can't do that. For Dreamland, I wanted to, I wanted to, so all the Christmas trees were black. So we bought, you know, a lot of Christmas trees and spray painted them black. And the initial idea was to hang them from the ceiling of the space over the Burton objects to create these sort of like crazy chandeliers. Um, but we realized that was wow, it would have been amazing. It was just too ambitious, and the structure of the ceiling wouldn't it wouldn't work. It would have been too much. So we weren't able to do that. Um, but in general, um, everyone on the creative team at the McNay is is wonderful to work with, and at the McNay we're often more than often encouraged to think outside the box and come up with new ways of presenting artworks and engaging the public. So the graphics that we used, the giant snowflakes. I mean, we had small, beautiful snowflakes that you saw when you first walked in, and then at the back of the exhibition, there were these gargantuan, surreal spiky snowflakes that were actually moving up the wall. So creating this sense of like topsy-turvy, moving from something gentle and Christmassy to something that's really kind of maybe dangerous. Um, uh, but yeah, so I can't think of really anything that's not other than the Christmas trees. Um, we've done a lot of really unique, interesting things. Oh, something that I did not show is, and you can look it up on the McNay website. I did a wonderful exhibition called "Is It Real? Staging Nature," and we have these designs in the collection by Earl Straley of um, the opera. It'll come to me. I can't remember the name of the opera, but they were doing the opera at San Antonio's opera, and this set that he designed was a touring set, and so San Antonio Opera was doing the opera of this and using the set pieces that were designed by Straley. So again, the prep team, after they were done, that was the last performance that the set was going to be used. It was going to be thrown into a dumpster. So we secured a giant tree that's about 40 feet tall, and they stored it for about 2 years, much to their dismay, but to my delight. And we eventually used it as a showpiece for two exhibitions, sequential exhibitions. Um, and that was just wonderful to be creative and to adjust this ginormous set piece to fit into the Brown Gallery. And then we left the back open so people could walk around the tree and they would see what it looked like from stage when you walk behind it. So you could see how it was made. So a really nice, piece of teaching and learning about stagecraft. Um, but yeah, really, most everything got creative happened.
Do we have any more questions for Scott? Great. I have one more, and I
Okay.
hope this is fair to ask because you haven't started the position as dean yet. But um, do you predict that you'll be using any of this past experience to help inform your new position? And what are you kind of excited to already know about?
Absolutely. And the experience at the McNay as a curator um, was one of the many facets that helped me um, secure this new position as dean of the McCall School. Um, I'll be working with faculty and students in visual art and performing arts. And the idea of having worked as a curator, having that understanding of the world that the visual artists might be stepping into will help me create a better academic environment for them, um, along with my music background uh, and theater and dance background through UT Austin. So yeah, working at the McNay and having, I mean, the kind of the shorthand is I speak opera, I speak music, I speak dance, I speak acting, I speak theater, I speak visual art, and all those different languages. Um, and yeah, and so to be able to be back in academia and use that knowledge to create a better uh, to create better programs for students so they are better able to be successful in their creative environments post graduation. It's like a dream.
Great. Thank you so much. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Scott. I really appreciate you doing this. And thank you, everybody, for coming.
You're very
I,
welcome, and it was nice to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
yes, thank you. Okay. Um, bye, I guess.
Have a great one. Bye.
You too.